joined by Dominic Walsh, who's an analyst with the think tank Open Europe. If we have a look at what was just said there, that was a plead, I think, from Boris Johnson. Please, rebels, don't leave me in my moment of need here. Do stick with what I am trying to do. But at the same time, we just heard one of his own MPs has quit, left his party, and now means that Boris Johnson and the Conservatives don't have a majority. What's that going to mean as we go into this really tumultuous period?
Yes, so we just saw that Philip Lee, as a Tory Remain MP, has crossed the floor while Boris Johnson was speaking and joined with Liberal Democrats, which is something that he had been hinting that he was going to do for a while, but it's nevertheless a remarkable moment. It's important to remember that it's the government's technical majority is now less than zero, but it's majority in practice is still maybe one or two because there's a couple of independent MPs who vote with the government, but it still just kind of emphasises just how tight the numbers are. But it's also, with the threat of deselection hanging over the heads of potential Tory rebels this evening, you could argue it was a case of Lee jumping before he was pushed.
Let's talk a little bit about that. We have a busy couple of days in Parliament, to put it mildly. So this afternoon we're expecting MPs to move a motion for an emergency debate. Tell us what happens there and then what happens over the next couple of days.
So they move a motion for an emergency debate, and then it's up to John Bercow, the Speaker of the House of Commons, about whether he grants it or not. Traditionally, emergency debates don't come with a substantive motion that has any legal effect, but this particular one does. So Bercow would be again kind of bending procedural rules to allow Parliament to have its say, which he has a track record of doing. So he's expected to allow that. The motion under the emergency debate, which will be voted on quite late tonight, would reserve tomorrow as a day under which MPs would take control of parliamentary time, and priority would be given to the bill that everyone's been talking about, which would seek to force Boris Johnson to extend Article 50 for up to 3 months if there's no deal agreed by the 19th of October.
We just heard then he's lost his technical majority, but not necessarily his working majority, but he's got these 20 or so rebels in his own party who could vote against him in this bill we're talking about. So do you think it's likely it would pass? And if it does pass, what happens then?
I think it is likely it would pass. I mean, I've been looking at the numbers, and so various people, and I think it's around 15 or 16 Conservative MPs have said that they're going to rebel this evening. Obviously, what politicians say and what politicians do doesn't always exactly match up. But if you take them at their word, I think that's easily enough for the opposition to win tonight. You'll probably get a few Labour MPs going the other way, but maybe more like 8 or 10, which won't be enough to outweigh the Conservative rebels voting with the opposition. And then is the question of, does Boris Johnson follow through on his threats to remove the whip from the rebels, in which case his working majority would drop to maybe sort of minus 30 if there's 15 rebels, for example.
So at this point then we suspect that Boris Johnson is going to call an election for October 14. From your perspective, do you think his Conservatives could win that election?
I think it's very kind of touch and go, really, because, I mean, on the one hand, the Conservatives are doing very well in the polls at the moment, which is a good sign. They're sort of 10 points clear of Labour. They've won votes back from the Brexit Party, while Labour and the Lib Dems remain kind of neck and neck in second place. But on the other hand, it's not just about votes, it's about seats. And the worrying potential issue for Boris Johnson is that they're probably expected to lose maybe a handful of seats, up to 10 seats in Scotland to the Scottish National Party, most of the ones which they won originally in the last election, and perhaps around the same number, perhaps 10 to 15 seats to the Liberal Democrats in parts of southern and southwestern England. And then that means that just to stand still, they're going to have to win 30 to 40 seats from Labour in northern England. And whilst Labour aren't doing very well in the opinion polls, it's in many of these places their majorities are quite high. So it's a challenging task for sure.
And a huge risk for Boris Johnson to be taking. Dominic Walsh, thank you very much.